one thing that's interesting to say is that nowadays the market has lots of employers not in academia as well. For example, the World Bank hires at the job market. Private companies hire at the job market conference as well.
They might receive what, hundreds of applications?
Hundreds, yes, absolutely.
So how do you get on the top of the pile?
Me personally, I think I applied to more than 150 places.
Wow, that's very useful to know.
Or also take the PhD path because they want to postpone answering this question of what do you want to do with your life in the end game, like 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, which of course is really hard to answer. Like most people don't know, and I don't think I really know. But I think in the end of the day, it's really the most important question you could try answering.
But then you have control over measure what the effect of this
Welcome everyone on this 7th episode of the Unbiased podcast, your podcast about women and men of science, and more particularly about scientific research in economics. And today, I'm really honored and thankful to have Ricardo Dahis from PUC-rio, where he is an assistant professor in economics. And a few months ago, actually in March, I've seen one of his posts on Twitter who reached out to many people and created many reactions about the job market in academia, something that's not well known until you are there, and where we have a ton to learn and to share experience. And that's really the point of this episode of the podcast. But first thing first, thank you again a ton to be here for your time, Ricardo. It's very generous. And I'm really glad to share all this with you. And first, I would like to know a bit more about you.
Of course. Thanks, Quentin. This is a lovely opportunity to share. And Twitter was a first pass, but having a space in a podcast and with your reach to the audience, I think is always the more the better. So I'm glad to be here.
Thank you.
About myself, very quickly, my background is in economics in undergrad, master's, and PhD. I did my undergrad and master's at PUC-rio, where I am at now as an assistant professor, and did my PhD at Northwestern University in Chicago for 6 years as well.
What about your focus on research, if you would like to share in a few words on that?
Yeah, absolutely. My fields are mainly development economics and political economy. Most of my papers are on Brazil, where I'm from, where I think I have some comparative advantage of like knowing the institutional background, the data, knowing what questions to ask. And in my free time that I should be spending on many other things as well, but I do work on an NGO that has a mission to make data access universal in Brazil. And we spend a lot of time discussing open data, cleaning data sets, making things available online to people. So that's my other hat I usually wear.
That seems all very enriching, and actually something I would like to jump on, and that it's very important in research, and that you pointed to, is that we usually, researchers are in our office, work on very various data sets and problems where sometimes, and I speak for myself, I never went there. I have my single author paper was about weapon trades, and even if Switzerland is a good arm producer, I never went to a conflict zone or where this violence takes place. I think that's what I've witnessed, is that indeed in research, when you have people who really know what's behind the data, exactly as you're saying, you lived in Brazil, you understand what's behind the data, you understand things that are not in the data, usually, basically, that could translate in measurement errors or some things, but the main thing is that it really gives more depth and realism to the research. And indeed, I completely follow you on that. That is incredibly important.
Yeah, definitely. It's something that economists, I think, are doing more and more recently. Right? The institutional background section of your paper is becoming more important, and people are putting more effort into understanding the country and the setup better. but we should still do much more. And like knowing the country well and specializing in a field helps.
Completely agreed.
Yeah, definitely.
One thing in that direction, I try to challenge my research by going to present to really fields experts, like presenting this stuff on arms to NGOs working only on that. And maybe it's presenting, if for example, your fields or your presentations is not something you have the expertise yet, you can also challenge with other people who are maybe not in academia or who are presenting in the country where you are studying now the issue, or with, again, fields, policymakers, field experts that are concerned by that. But we are both, to be honest, really on time pressure because it's the beginning of the semester. We have tons of things to do, and let's jump to the core of this discussion and really what we want to discuss. Something that I'm doing at the moment, really building an academic career. Something that's incredibly tough. And again, I saw your posts while I was doing on this path, trying to fight to publish papers and so on and so forth. And I think and many things felt really important to read to me, to someone who was becoming a professor and reaching this goal. And I think the first thing I would like to basically describe, I think will be important for the audience, is kind of the landscape. Just to give the ingredients to the people, what is it to go on the market? What do we mean by that? I mean, is it like for any job, or what's so specific about academia? So would you like to start to describe, in your opinion, how is it to understand or to tell to a first-year PhD student, how is it to go on the market? What do we mean by that? Would you like to go on that?
Or yeah, I can start, or even better, describing to my parents or to someone not in academia what the academic job market is like. Nowadays, the academic job market in economics happens in a few stages, and it's very well structured. So basically, first students prepare their portfolios, all their papers and their CVs, and they requested letters of recommendation, etc. They build their package, their statement of purpose, their documents, their everything that they've worked until their fifth or nowadays usually sixth year, and they send their applications to employers that have open posts, which are all posted on centralized websites. Nowadays, it's by the American Economic Association. There's another one in Europe, and there are a few platforms that centralize this. And they go through these steps. They have interviews that happen at this conference organized by the American Economic Association, one in Europe, the European Economic Association now, and there are even ones appearing in Asia and in other regions. And they go through this whole process of like first interviews, then flyouts where they present their research at universities, and at some point they may receive offers, and there's a bit of back and forth in terms of negotiations, etc. But in general, it's really a well-structured, thick market where there's supply and there's demand, and everyone meets at the same place, or nowadays virtually, but at the same time, and the market tries to adjust, and offers are made, and people try to maximize. One thing that's interesting to say is that nowadays the market has lots of employers not in academia as well. For example, the World Bank hires at the job market. Private companies hire at the job market conference as well, and many others. So it's really there's a wide variety of employers, and PhD students and postdocs, etc., all meet there. It's the supply.
And one thing maybe is it's very competitive, right? So basically there is this facilitating, well-structured, you know where to send, but then it creates kind of this maybe difficulty that for a top position or something that looks like a top position on paper, they might receive what, hundreds of applications?
Hundreds, yes, absolutely.
So how do you
That's
get on the top of the pile?
that's a huge challenge, as you said, because of this structure that's so standardized. It creates a lot of work for both sides of the market, right? For the supply and the demand, and then it really becomes this signaling game where you have to be perfect in every single way, academically, and you need to have many papers and publications, etc. It really becomes very competitive, and to rise and shine above the competition becomes very tricky and real toil, I think, on your mental health, and which we'll talk about more as well.
Yeah, exactly. So what will be the key thing important to sell? So definitely, you have a job market paper, which is kind of usually your main piece during your PhD thesis, that you put a lot of effort, that's super fancy and show really your quality. You spend most of the time on that, and usually you're the single author. You are just to really reflect your competences as a writer, as everything empirical, maybe theoretical, getting the data, technical knowledge are mostly reflected. If you are alone on the paper, it's easier again with the signaling ID to show, okay, hey, I did that alone. So if you see something here, I'm able to do that. Is that what you see as well? Or what you would say as
yes,
well?
that's generally true. The norm of being a single author, I think, is shifting. I see more and more job market papers that are co-authored, and things seem to be fine. Like, I haven't seen any problems. So I would say that that's shifting. But in general, yes, you want to showcase your skills and your research ideas and your portfolio of what you build in the next few years. If you go into a tenure track career, and that's but we also talk about like the other work alternatives that are more and more present nowadays that are not like tenure track.
Exactly. So I think that's super important. So if we try to split, let's go for academia first, and then indeed we keep that in mind and say to the audience that it's incredibly important during your PhD and thinking about the job market that there is a world outside academia where you have key competencies that might be useful, that are definitely tremendously useful, and the way to sell yourself and put yourself up front on the two are a bit different. So let's take one first and maybe think about academia. So you have basically your fancy single author or not single author paper, but something else. I mean, the academic world is a bit small, right? And it seems that to me, if you have 200 applications, 500s, that are, at least that's what I feel and I've heard, and would like to know about that from your perspective, but kind of where do you come from? Like, what was your PhD supervisor? If you have a key recommendation letter from a top scholar, or or if you were in a top university, those weights a lot in your application. What do you think about that?
I think that's true. So me personally, I think I applied to more than 150 places.
Wow, that's very useful to know. Wow.
Just as a point of reference.
Exactly. No, that's super
useful. The audience. And I think that's kind of the average nowadays, especially given how easy it is to apply to one more place, right? Everything's online and you have your materials ready, etc. So you just keep applying. At some point you have to decide, where do you want to stop at? Like, what are the places that you would never want to go if you only had that offer? So I think that's a good criteria. But yeah, as you mentioned, many things are important for the application. The letters of recommendation will be the main one that that I think summarize all that you've done during your PhD, your relationship with your advisors, the work, the papers you have, like your prospects. But you can signal with other things too, with your portfolio, with your statement of purpose. You can like describe your vision for what you want to do as research for the next few years. I think all these things matter, but in reality, it's just people always say that I'm only about to witness now as I've changed to the other side of the fence as a professor, but there's a lot of randomness too that should be accounted for. Like I've heard stories that are just crazy, showing like how random it can be, that some people get picked for interviews and others don't. But like in the end, the market somehow clears and yeah.
Is there an example that you can share or not? Feel free to say no.
I won't say names or like say what the institution was, but one story I heard is that they picked, I think, 6 candidates for interviews, and the admin staff at the place split into like first 3 and second group of 3 to do the interviews before and after like a holiday or a weekend or something. And the people involved in admissions and in hiring said, well, let's interview these first 3. If we like 1 or 2 of them, we don't even have to interview the other 3. So, you know, things like this.
Yeah, I see.
If you end up in the second path, yeah.
Yeah, if you do statistics, you see how this might be a problem to have something unbiased on the 6 candidate. Okay, very good. But something that's striking with what you said, and is definitely linked to your post, is that you applied to 150 places. That was worldwide, right?
Oh yeah, worldwide. In the United States, in Canada, many places in Europe, many places in South America. I haven't applied to countries in Asia or Africa, and I've applied to Australia as well. But that's worldwide. Yeah.
And so I think that's a key thing, right? It's that for most, there is a spot for you somewhere, but it's somewhere. It means that you are so specialized to align with the offer, job and demand and offer. You have to be ready often to go very far and to move for several years. And so,
exactly.
So this is quite tough. And just again, maybe just to give the landscape to be sure that we are clear with everyone, is that usually you finish your PhD, you might get assistant professor or tenure track if you have very impressive candidates, if you are a very impressive candidate. But often after the PhD, you have the postdoc, right? You have a few years that are kind of the lump, the in between. You are not sure where you're going to end up. You keep pushing this deadline of becoming a professor, and you have. I always felt like there was this race that I'm feeling right now against the clock. Like your PhD ends, and then for every year you have to really show a good record, publication record, and with the time it has to increase proportionally if you want to keep in the race. So
and if you do postdocs for 1 or 2 or 3 years, then you start a potential tenure track position, which you would only get tenure if everything goes according to the plan in 6 or 7 or 8 years. So then you're basically only finished when you're 40. So if you want to have kids or if you want to pursue other aspects of life, you really have to push other things to the background.
Yeah, so which is completely agreed. So really, that's going back to the core or the things that's resonated the more in me when I saw your Twitter post. It was this infinite variability, basically and it affects the 2 main dimensions, time and space. You have to be ready to move everywhere or anywhere several times potentially, and it's very hard to know the deadline because, as you said, maybe you get something on the job market after the PhD, but maybe it's just a postdoc. And a postdoc, sometimes I've met brilliant people going for 6 years on their postdoc before. And now I think about somebody who doesn't have yet, to my knowledge, a tenure track and has publication in AER and really top journals on their own. But then you have to really push. And as you said, maybe you are 40 years old when you can settle. And I think also there is this idea, or I'm really interested by your view on that basically the PhD is tough, but you know that it's for 4 or 5 years and you have a clear deadline and type of work you should do. Like for us, it was at least 3 papers with of quality that could be published in a relatively good journal. It's a bit vague, but that's how it's said, and 1 single author. So it's pretty clear, and you have 5 years to do that. You can extend one for 1 year. Then you have this PhD postdoc, you're not sure on space and duration. And then you have the tenure track, where usually, just again to explain to the viewers, you have what, maybe 3 years on average, or how long will you say to reach some threshold? Or...
For tenure, it's I think on average 6 years.
Wow.
Some universities go for longer, for 7 or 8.
Wow. Okay, so then you have this amount of time to reach a certain goal of publications, basically.
Yeah, I've seen it vary. Some universities do tenure letter-based. So by the time you're applying for tenure, you need for other people, other researchers in the field to write you tenure letters and recommend you for tenure. So technically, it doesn't boil down to a specific number of publications.
Okay,
it's just really like how important of a research you do. Mm-hmm. But other universities do use a specific number of papers with like grading, journals, etc., so that you have to reach.
Yeah. I see. And also I was discussing this, so it's a bit all over the place, but we'll focus back and take each point maybe. But now it just again rings a bell, because we are discussing about that in the institution I'm now. Obviously, I'm interested in scientific communication and impacting the real world, if I may say, so outside academia. And have you witnessed at some point in this selection process that it was important or taken into account something else that's than the publication, scientific publication?
You mean for jobs?
For job in academia.
Job market? Well, it's a tough question. I can't say I have the true answer. I only have my experience and what I've seen. But unfortunately, I think the answer is no. I think what really matters is your research portfolio and potential for the next 5 years if you are hired, and also if you're a nice person that people want to have around and as a colleague in the office next door. But I think that having parallel work in NGOs or experience in the private sector or other things may only marginally help. But yeah, I think what research departments mostly want are publications in good journals. It's just
it's just the core and the driver of university. Again, that's something that's many students. So I'm teaching mostly to first-year bachelor students, and that's something that's completely blew their mind. They really had no idea about the fact that the professors in front of them, most of the time, teaching is the last thing on their priority list. Sorry if I say that directly. It's not the case for everyone, definitely, but for many persons, it's the last thing. For those reasons, because the whole driver for money, for rankings of university, for visibility, for hiring more staff, for attracting top scholars, is just the publications. And I think that's really something that should change, that has to change, because if we all do, that's my view as of today, as a very young scholar who potentially will never end up as a professor. But I really think that, sometimes I've seen incredible research that would have massive impact, or at least an impact to the real world, and really asking or witnessing people asking in the seminar room, did you reach out to the policymakers, decision makers, to the firms, and people were laughing most of the time. They never even thought about that, or even want to do that. And I think there is really a loss of benefit for the world if we keep doing research for our friends who will cite us. It's a bit and I think it starts there, right? It might start there, putting more weight for the PhDs, for the new wave, the future professor, to say, hey, in your portfolio, actually, it will be important that you do some communication, that you try to push to connect with the world, with the population or decision makers? Or yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it would be beneficial both ways, right? Both to better inform research and as researchers understand the real world better and formulate better hypotheses, etc. But we can also have a huge impact in policy and the real world and just like talking to policymakers and sometimes like giving some advice on how to design policy, how to implement better like statistics departments and things of the sort. So we can really benefit from this two-ended relationship.
Mhm, mhm. Agreed. And about so we talk about academia. How did you manage, or do you have any recommendation advice to manage this variability of time and space? What was your goal, and do you have any advice for future or current people on the job market?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Let me say it was hard. It was really hard psychologically on me and definitely on many of my colleagues and friends I saw. Because as you said, it's hard to imagine that you can be in 150 different cities with different living conditions, different distances from your family or from your loved ones, and for meaningful personal life, etc. So it's really hard. What I did to try to manage was to first like have have relationships, have friends, have people that you can meet regularly, which was made extra hard because I was on the market last year in the midst of the pandemic. So it was extra hard to be outside and to socialize with people. The obvious things of like do sports, do physical activities, try not to sit on your computer for too long, for 12 hours a day, try to relax. Sometimes like watch dumb things on TV. I've done a lot of reality shows and like movies, things to get your mind off the job market.
Yeah.
So these things help, but to be honest, it was just really hard. It was a lot of constant email checking, lots of comparing yourself to other candidates, lots of imposter syndromes, lots of these feelings that are hard to avoid, I think, which do have some toll on you. People usually take months to recover from the market psychologically. And I think that myself, I'm still recovering. I'm still on the upward trend. Like I'm starting to feel more excitement for research again and starting to feel on top of my game now. But it took months. Like we're in September, the market ended in March, and I'm still tired from it for sure.
So from preparing application, the competition, this uncertainty, as you said, really comparing. So I think it's tremendously important what you share. That's something I've never heard, and I think that's so important when you feel that you face difficulties, and then you're like, okay, but that's kind of something that's commonly shared. It's tough. It's really tough, and I think that's a huge. That might be of huge support to many.
I hope. Yeah, I hope so. I think one other thing that I discussed on the thread that we can talk here too is that I tried to give a balanced view of the PhD as a life choice to people. Like, let's not deny that it's a great opportunity for learning, for pursuing questions that you're interested at. You have right. You have the intellectual freedom. You're paid to study most often and to teach, of course, and to do research assistantship. But you have this amazing opportunity to be around smart people, to be in an intellectual environment. That's all great, and it's highly. It feels like an achievement for sure. But I also like to point out this other side to people that like the PhD is not your only choice in life. Like life is much more than publishing papers, etc. And I think the choice boils down to whether you really want to do research as professionally. in an academic environment or in like other environments that involve research, like the World Bank, the IMF, or I don't know, like think tanks, etc. But it's really not for everyone, and that's fine. Like you should just know what you like and what you want, and you should be aware that it's, for example, mental health is not in good shape in econ now, because partly of the nature of the work, I think, because you spend many hours alone in your office, because deadlines are really long, and because you usually only receive criticisms instead of compliments. There are a bunch of just features of the work that may change in the coming years, but are partly what it is. And maybe you prefer to work in teams and to have shorter deadlines and to have more concrete deliverables that you know, you work on a project, it lasts for 3 months, it has a beginning, a middle, an end, and you see something concrete come out of it, etc. That are really different from what you do in academia. So I think in the end, it really boils down to if you think it's worth it, etc. One other point that I say to people is don't underestimate the 5 or 6 years that you spend on your PhD as an important chunk of your life. Like, it's a really long time to be away from home many times, very often. You change during these 5 or 6 years. Like, I got gray hair, and I like, you know, you miss important life events. I missed many weddings of friends. I missed my nephew being born. Like, you miss things from your life, which is like part of the decision to pursue a PhD. But I'm sorry if I'm going too long, but maybe just one more thing to say that I also pointed out in the thread is that people often, I think, face this illusion that the PhD is the only option for you, or also take the PhD path because they want to postpone answering this question of what do you want to do with your life in the end game, like 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, which of course is really hard to answer. Like, most people don't know, and I don't think I really know. But I think in the end of the day, it's really the most important question you could try answering. And you want to answer that as soon as possible. And to answer that as soon as possible, it may take doing things that are not research related. It may take taking a summer internship. It may require traveling. It may require doing something else, like pursuing other interests, just to make sure that you really want to do something. In this case, maybe the PhD. Because again, if you want to stay doing research, then it makes a lot of sense to do the PhD. But if not, then it doesn't. And the opportunity cost is really high. You could be working in some company, you could be doing something else, potentially making more money and having a very fulfilling life as well. So yeah, it's not a silver bullet for everything. And very often people are biased in their estimations. And I think having this more balanced view of the decision helps. And I agree from where you started that this is not very often discussed, and I think the information is not really out there.
No, that was thank you very. No, indeed, I everything you said was resonating in me. Really, I think that's really something key to understand and to weight the pros and cons. And something I always share and told to students who ask me about a PhD, I always told them the first thing should be that you will enjoy, and you think that you enjoy those PhD years. You want to do the PhD solely for doing a PhD in the sense, not necessarily for what's after potentially, because you have no clue if you end up tenure track, you have no clue in 6 years from now what will be your interest, if that job at the World Bank will be the thing you want to do, or if you, in the meantime, you will have a family or something. And as you said, if you postpone absolutely everything, it might be very costly. 6 years is a long time, as you said. or 5 years. And again,
Yeah.
I mean, I talk with professors who told me exactly that, accomplished professors who told me I waited until I don't know how old they were until I have children. I had to get a divorce. We split up with my husband during the postdoc because I wanted to keep doing research and moving, and it was not compatible. And many stories like that. And people who told me now, who are close to the tenure track, told me, I wish I could get a few years back from my life. I can't. And I think those things are really deep and really important to consider. And I think just to if I may just ask you one last thing, because we are on a time constraint, and obviously we could go for a very long time together.
Yeah.
But one last thing that's related to all that you mentioned, does it help psychologically to always think, to keep a side door open, as we discussed on this podcast before, basically going for something else than academia, considering during all the process, even if you stop, you are not done, right? Professionally, you have learned a ton of things that are useful for outside academia. You're a project leader. You might know now to do research, work on your own, organize deadlines, things that in a world that's completely open, a massive ocean of unknown, and you manage to deal with this unknown. And I think those are useful things to keep in mind. So just a last word on that, if you would, just give us your input on how would you keep this side door open to maybe not go in academia but outside? Do you have one or two advice about that? And do you feel that it might help also psychologically?
It definitely helps psychologically. And it's good to point out that you indeed learn a lot during the PhD, skills that are useful for other things in life and for other professions. As you mentioned, like you learn to organize, learn to manage projects, you learn to be disciplined, and you learn to learn fast, which is very relevant too. And you only realize that after a few years into the PhD, when you go back to like learning, say, undergrad classes, you do really well, and you realize, whoa, I've just learned how to learn, and this is a really useful skill. So it really helps for sure. And if you do more applied work, it also helps to learn how to code and computing, statistics, things that are really of value in the private sector nowadays, and basically everywhere. If you're proficient at coding, I would really recommend sharpening those skills. And but yeah, in general, I would say keep the door open for other things and try to reduce the weight of what if I don't do a PhD, or what if I maybe drop out of the PhD, or what if I finish the PhD and decide not to stay in academia. Just try to lift some weight out of this and make the decision lighter on yourself. And life is, you only live once. It sounds cheesy, but it's true. And life is short. So you really want to, at the end of the day, be happy and like have a meaningful life in whatever way you think is right. And the decision is yours. Like, don't be carried away by this potential judgment, quote unquote, of others, because it doesn't really matter. So,
Ricardo, I think that's really, I would like to keep going on different things, but I think that's a very important and very perfect way to end this discussion. To think we keep discussing about our passions, about this job market, about professional life, but I completely agree with you that there is more in life, and that in the end it's the thing that we might remember the most will be the thing with friends, with colleagues that we've met, but with people, at least to me, in the end. And I think that's a very important message.
Yeah, I just want to finish by saying maybe doing the PhD and pursuing an academic career is the choice that will make you happiest. Let's not like that's still
exactly
the game. It's just be sure of what you like and what you want, and just try to live that decision, and that's all.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you so much for the podcast. Congrats on the show. This is really useful to spread information, and you do it really well. So